I did get something. I did. Hey, Scott from MyGrowthRings.com here, and with me here is Tom from the Woodshop Nerdery channel. For those of you who don't know Tom, he recently shut down his channel, though he didn't turn it off. Thank you, Tom, for keeping it available for everybody. An excellent channel. But we are here to talk about our recent experience at the what did they call that get together?
It was the 75th anniversary National Users Event.
It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So we were going to get together and chat. I said, let's record this and share this. And Tom is like, really? Thank you for your willingness to share.
Yeah.
So
no problem.
For those who don't know about it or didn't experience it, I did a video right afterwards with the new owner of Shopsmith, and we talked a little bit about what went on over the weekend. But since Tom and I shared that experience from a participant standpoint, thought it would be fun to share. So let's just go back. This was originally a brainchild of who thought this up?
I believe it was John Dalton who started sort of beating the bushes on the Facebook user group. And to my understanding, his original intent was to do a 10ER, the 10ER fans, because it really is the 10ER that hits the 75-year mark. I guess we could have another 75 anniversary for the Mark V. What would that be? 1951
It's not 51. Nope. And has this been contested over 1,000 times. It's either 53 or 54 or 55, depending on who you talk to. But
okay.
It was introduced publicly in 54, for sure was in full production in 55.
Okay. So let's put a round number on it, 55. So I think they're really counting the 75 years from the 1947 of the Shopsmith 10E.
Right.
And really it was supposed to be last year.
Yes.
So it's delayed anyway. So we could have a Mark V 75th anniversary celebration, which we should. I think we should absolutely do that. But as John was starting to talk to people and gauge interest in the Facebook community, he realized that it wasn't just the 10ER owners who were really excited about this idea. And he realized he had to make it bigger. And then I think, from what I understand, David Noble connected with John, and David has some background in organizing fundraiser events and things like that through nonprofits. That was his career before he retired. So he had a lot of skill at, setting up hotel rooms and conference rooms and things like that. So those two sort of got together and worked with Shopsmith, who the employees at Shopsmith, who also pitched in and added a lot on their end to create what I think was a really excellent weekend. I mean, I had a blast. I thought it was a huge success. It was limited in the size, the number of people. I think we could have easily had 300 or 400 people there.
Oh, easily.
But the way it was structured and the way it was advertised, I think it was a good way to test the water on something like either a yearly user event or maybe every 5-year user event.
So there were about, what was it, about 85 people.
80 to 85 is my understanding.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to get a count because people come and go. But I guess if you use the T-shirt math.
Yes.
They had 6 T-shirts that were not picked up. Although 2 of those names I recognize as having been there and then left before Saturday morning. So let's say it's around 3 T-shirts that weren't picked up. So I think that puts the number at 82.
All right. So the event began on Friday, potentially Friday morning. So they took the group, they divided the group into 2 halves. And one half was the morning session that was to arrive at the factory on Friday morning, and for all we knew, just tour the factory. I mean, that was the promise. And then the second half would arrive sometime around noon. And when we pulled in, one of the things that we noted was they were in the process of taping off an area, and Jim McCann was doing the taping, and he says, "Oh yeah, we're going to have a food truck here, for folks that want to be here for lunchtime." And then we go into the space that used to be the entrance of the old showroom. I don't know if you were ever there when it was a store, but there was That space that we were in was about an eighth of the size of the showroom. It was a huge space, but they've since cordoned that off and made a few other spaces out of it. And we milled around. They had donuts, they had coffee. What else did we see there?
Well, I'd like to mention that the area that we were in is the film studio for Shopsmith Hands Online. So when you take the factory tour and you go into the space that you're talking about, you're seeing the filming studio with the lights on top and the painted background and all those tools that you see behind Nick Engler and other folks on those Hands Online videos. I think that's particularly interesting.
Yeah.
And it's ready to go. I mean, they could turn the camera on at any time.
But do you think they still have that grainy camera?
The what?
That grainy camera. That potato that they filmed those on.
Well, I bought probably a 30-year-old wet dry grinder in the charity auction. So if they had the 30-year-old wet dry they probably have the camera.
You're right. So as we entered, on one side of the door there was a table full of bags, and it was told to us a little bit later that was swag for each of us. And in that, you got all your stuff. Mine is back at the kitchen, the house.
Yeah, so I've got this was given away Friday evening. I think this was in the swag Friday evening.
Okay.
And a t-shirt. Yeah.
So did you win that because you have a number on that bag? They must have drawn your number.
Yes. So there were something.
Okay. But the Friday morning swag was, we all got t-shirts, we all got notepad. What else did we get in that bag? Do you recall?
Pencils and cup holders.
That's right.
I believe I might be mixing it up, but it was a nice little welcome gift.
Yeah.
I believe you could also pick up some of the posters.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a whoops. Let me get it in camera. Here's the 5 tools in one. So this is a Mark V, model 520 with the Pro Fence system, and there's a total of 3 posters. Here's a Mark 7, and then I think the other one is this is kind of cool. They even went back, sort of honoring the 75th anniversary.
Neat.
So this is a neat poster. I mean,
Yes.
I was happy to receive those gifts from Shopsmith.
Absolutely.
And I think that was also partly organized by John and David, the swag bags, and that was part of the fee that we paid.
Yeah.
In cooperation with Shopsmith.
That's right. So once there was a quick little sit down where we were all welcomed, and Bob Folkerth stood up, welcomed everybody, and introduced all the employees that were there and that had helped out and that would be helping out throughout the day. And then he shocked all of us by saying, "Oh, and there's one more person you need to meet. This is Nick Cups, who is, as of last week, the new owner of Shopsmith." And at that point, there was really very much a handing off of the baton, and Nick kind of took the helm. Mm-hmm. And he shared some things with us that I think were pretty well reflected in the interview that he did with me last week. Was there anything else that you took away from that little intro that he did with us? Anything that should be shared here?
Yeah. What really came, Nick Cup did my tour. Is it Nick Cup or Nick Cups?
It's plural.
Nick Cups. Okay. He did our tour, and what he lacks in sort of specific technical knowledge about the Shopsmith machine, he makes up in enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I think this guy loves this company. And my expectation is that he's going to try quite a few new things. Some of those new things are going to work out, and some of them aren't. And so I think it's going to be an interesting ride, but he has every opportunity in the world to do well. there's enormous amount of untapped potential in that company, and I think he knows it.
Yeah. Yeah. So the morning session, they divided into a few groups. And one group, we all had name tags, and on our name tags, there was a letter, and that designated what session that we would be heading to next. So one group went on the tour with Nick. One group went into well, actually, it used to be my old academy there. Mm-hmm. They had divided it up since I was there last. That was a little bit claustrophobic. But we sat down with Jim McCann and Nick Engler, and they spoke with us again while one group was touring. The third group was, I found out later, in that same room with Bob Fulker. We'll talk about that in a bit. What session were you in first?
I did the tour first. So I think it was Group A or something, Group C or something. So we did the factory tour first, and it Nick gave, like I said, Nick gave the factory tour, and it was a very new perspective. It was more detailed than I had seen before. So I took the factory tour when I picked up my Mark 7 in 2022. This tour was much more detailed. I mean, really went through every station. And, yeah, there were times where we said, okay, that's a way tube and that's that's a quill feed, so there were times, when he was searching for the names of things, but it was much more detailed, and you really got a sense of him and how he viewed it. So yeah, so we went on the factory tour first.
I think like most of us, he was really surprised to see all the old headstocks that were incorporated into the machinery.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure that he would call those headstocks. He might call them smart motors.
Smart motors. Yeah.
No, I don't think those were very smart. Yeah. When they got to the area where they were talking about how the Mark V comes together, or the various marks, as they were calling them, come together, he understood that. He understood that the flow comes to that one area, that heart of the assembly of the machine. And that's interesting to a lot of folks.
He had very basic terms about, the table is fitted and, everything's aligned so that it leaves the factory aligned. Right. Yeah. So he understood the benefit of that tool to the product. I don't think he understood the engineering of how it was done. Something he did understand, right? He didn't understand necessarily nuts and bolts, but you must understand, when he looks at all that equipment, he's thinking about costs and efficiency.
Right.
And so he did make several comments about one of the machines that does, I believe it's the drilling and some of the drilling in the headstock, or maybe it's the table. It's the table.
Oh, right? Yes. Yeah. For the main table. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, like a torture device of all these drill bits that come everywhere.
Yes.
It's a unique machine. It's one of a kind. Yeah. It's custom built. And he gave the example of a part broke on that, and it took 6 months to repair the machine. So in order to keep the throughput of the factory going, he needed, they needed to have that work done outside.
Yeah.
And the outside vendor was doing 1/10 of the
production,
piece per time unit at like triple the cost.
Right.
So he's looking at things like that as huge opportunities to lower production costs, make production more consistent. And, once you get your, production more consistent, and then also probably better quality, right? Because we all know that it's a high quality design of the machine, but I think we saw in my unboxing video that it's, it can go wrong, right?
Yeah.
They can mess it up. So what he explained on our factory tour is that if he can find these efficiencies, which he sees everywhere, right? He can't turn his head without seeing a way to do it better, that he can reduce production costs to the point where he can create a more efficient, lower cost production line, keep the prices the same, and offer free shipping. So he's, I don't know if he mentioned that in your video, but he's
that's
looking at
his
free
goal.
shipping.
Yep.
To modernize the sales strategy of the company, offer free shipping, and he thinks he can easily find those costs in production efficiencies. And as his multi-year plan goes on, as he scales up the numbers through marketing, which is, a fresh batch of unsqueezed oranges, right? So he's got all that orange juice to squeeze. That he will then again lower costs because he's producing these parts at a greater scale. And when you produce things at a greater scale, your per piece costs go down generally.
Did you see the movie Founder with Michael Keaton as Ray Kroc?
No.
I highly recommend it. And he was Ray Kroc experiencing how the McDonald brothers did what they did, how they were able to produce as many hamburgers and French fries at the speed in which they were able to produce it.
Okay.
And part of what they did back in those early days, not unlike Five Guys, not unlike In-N-Out Burger, not unlike Smash Burger, is they had a really limited menu. Mm-hmm. And they just made that as efficient as they possibly could. And seeing some of how the production cells work at Shopsmith was the other way around, because I was familiar with that. Seeing how the McDonald brothers had developed their methods reminded me so much of the way Shopsmith, at least initially, created those work cells. And yeah, that's there's still a ways to go. Mm-hmm. Still some things that they can do. So yeah, that was all really fascinating and neat to see, like you said, from his eyes, his perspective on things. So all right, so Nick has taken people on the tour. Another group of people are sitting with Jim McCann and Nick Engler. Jim McCann, who's head engineer at Shopsmith, I interviewed him on this channel twice. And Nick Engler, who has a now huge YouTube channel called the Woodshop Companion, but also historically produced videos for Shopsmith under the, were they calling them Sawdust Sessions at the time? Well, I think a couple names that they had.
Yeah, so I know them as Shopsmith Hands Online. Mm-hmm. I think what they did is they recorded them live stream as Sawdust Sessions, right? So they were live stream on Tuesday night or something as Sawdust Sessions. And then when they released those, they released them as Hands Online, is my understanding, which calls back to the Hands On magazine that Nick Engler and Jim McCann partnered on in the early 1980s, right?
Yep.
So when you were sitting in that room with Nick Engler and Jim McCann, you are sitting with a legendary Shopsmith team.
Had you met those guys?
I met Jim McCann when I visited Shopsmith.
Okay.
And talked to him. I talked to Nick via YouTube comments, and I got to meet him in person. And he very generously spent some time with me, and we talked quite a bit Friday, and we talked during the day and Friday night as well.
Awesome. He's a neat guy. A lot more hair than you'd ever imagine on a single man's head. He's leaning into that Albert Einstein look, I notice every episode.
Hey, from a YouTube perspective, a unique look doesn't hurt, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, have you picked up your blue hair dye yet?
I'm working on it.
Okay. Blue up top, orange on the chin.
Dude, I am so gonna age as gracefully as I possibly can, but there will not be any dye.
Okay.
No, not at all. So what was interesting about that session was they were pretty much winging it and playing on the interest of whatever group was sitting in front of them.
Right.
And, challenge of that is you got some folks that were just enamored and just happy to be in the room with them. Right. In our session, it centered on a lot of questions about dust collection. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely something that those guys know a ton about. Nick was, I think he was gone before the dust collector, the DC 3300 was introduced, but he was a user of those tools. And even after he left Shopsmith, he was very much tapped to be, a beta tester of a lot of product. So,
well, I'm going to challenge you on that, because there is a video that I studied very carefully when I did my dust collector YouTube video, where he goes through the science and the math of static pressure in relation to the DC 3300. Now he's doing it with the 42 inch or the 40-inch bag.
Keep in mind, Nick had a couple stints with Shopsmith. He had by the time the videos were being filmed, he had already left for 10 years and came back to do some classes and to do those videos.
Okay.
So yes, the DC 3300 was on the market at a point where he was working for the company, but he was gone, I believe, when it was introduced. So like I say, there was a stretch there, probably about 10 years. And in fact, there was even a time where Jim McCann left Shopsmith and went to work for Bookworks. So, he was working, building most of the projects and jigs that Nick was coming up with. So how about your session with him, with Nick and with Jim? What topics were discussed there?
Well, one of the things that dust collection was brought up as well, and there was several conversations on that. And gosh, I can't remember his name at the moment. I can tell you, Doug Smith, and you could contact him through Facebook. He is 3D printing accessories for the Shopsmith. And I actually bought 3 items from him Saturday morning, and they were all related to 4-inch, converting Shopsmith tools to 4-inch dust collection capacity. So I haven't tried it yet, but I think Doug's an innovator, and I like to support that. So I'm willing to give it a shot. And I guess I can report back later, but I'm going to convert my belt sander, the table saw guard, and the jointer to 4-inch dust ports. And so that should, because I run a 4-inch hose with a 4-inch to 2.5-inch reducer on that. And even just the reducer itself will cut my throughput in half.
Oh yeah.
So if I can keep it at 4-inch all the way to the machine, I'm going to get a great dust collection.
So the joiner dust chute and the belt sander dust chute are 1-for-1 replacements, right? But you're going to have a little bit of work to do for the saw guard. Is that right?
Yeah, you do. You do. And unfortunately, through various horse tradings, I have an extra saw guard. So you can either buy one from him that's already manufactured and glued together, or you can just buy the 3D printed piece, which is what I did, and then you sort of cut off the bits you don't need and epoxy it on.
Now then just off of that room, again, the timing for each group might have been a little different, but we were led down a hallway which they had set up as a temporary museum. Now, most of those machines that were in there, back when I was working for Shopsmith, they used to have those on display in a little room off of the, it was in between the factory showroom and the service area. So those are machines that I remember not touching, because they all said do not touch, and I was a rule follower back in those days. Distinctly remember not touching all those tools.
And look where that got you.
I know. The one tool that was missing from that was the Shopsmith radial arm saw that they used to have. It was actually the very first Shopsmith tool that John Folker purchased that got him into the whole Shopsmith thing. They had that on display. They had that out on the factory tour, that machine that used to be on display in their little museum. But was there anything there that you saw that was interesting?
Well, it was all interesting. Before I comment on that, I want to go back to Nick and Jim's session. Something that Jim brought up is that there are several new Shopsmith products in the pipeline. He seemed to be pretty excited about it, and he couldn't give us any details, which is the right thing to do, right? Because you come up with 10 ideas and then those 10 get reduced to 5, and those 10 to get reduced to 2, and 2 finally make it to market, and they don't know which, know which 2. So they're not talking about it. But one thing that he did talk about, he talked about Nick Cupp's 5-year plan, and he pointed out with the Power Pro system, it is without modification other than the end of the plug, international market ready. That Power Pro motor will automatically adapt to 50 hertz electricity in most other countries, right? Most other countries are using 50 hertz electricity. We use 60 in the United States. So they have a machine that the motor is ready to go international right now. There are some safety and certification issues that they'd have to go, but they're thinking big here.
Yep.
They're thinking big, which I think is wonderful.
I think so too. You know, that 10ER was made, I want to say, in New Zealand at one point under license by Magna. So there's no reason why they couldn't do that. Why they couldn't either have their own factories or license the machine to others, which would be interesting too.
Yeah, some people are surprised and disappointed when I say this, but Shopsmith equipment is assembled in the United States of America. If you notice, they do not put the Made in the USA label on their website or their equipment. No. It is assembled from a global supply chain. Now, I happen to know through the issues I had with my Shopsmith Mark 7 that very much many of the castings are produced local. I think Tip City is a vendor that there's a vendor in Tip City that produces a lot of
castings. Yes.
But there's and it would have to be a global supply chain. So what my response to people who are disappointed in that is that's 2023. Every manufacturing sector is sourcing from a global supply chain, yes, even if they're assembling in the United States of America. So there are some parts that are made in the United States of America. Can they get someone to do a headstock casting in France or
well, maybe they reserve the headstock for themselves because of the smart motor and the other things. Yeah. Maybe they do that, and the much of the rest could be produced locally. Yeah, I mean, I won't go into all the details, but yeah, if you look at a package, if you purchased a saw arbor from them anytime recently, the package says made in Taiwan on the back of it.
It has for years.
Their cast iron faceplates have been made in Taiwan for many, many years as well. But yeah, I mean, that's interesting, and to be able to tap into that market at one time back in the 90s, they had a store in Mississauga, Canada. They owned a store in the UK as well, and then they kind of brought all that back. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes. I know a lot of those folks just wish they could buy online from Shopsmith. They don't have to have a retail store. Just let them buy and ship things. Cut this pause out because my gosh, where'd my brain go?
So I interrupted. You asked me a question about
the museum. Because was there anything else there that caught your eye in the museum?
Well, I'm going to forget the name of it. Is it the 6000B or
the X6000?
X6000.
Yes.
It is the opposite of what I expected. So what we're talking about is the X6000 has the base mounts. So I'm going to use the correct term. From my understanding, on a Mark V, the one that's a two-piece that allows the pivot is a it's not a headstock. It's a
end.
I can't remember.
Well, there's a base. There's a base casting.
Well, the base mount. The base mount is the one that pivots because that's.
Yeah. I can go grab a manual. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the base mounts that allow the machine to pivot, okay, and can support SPT tools. They can notch up and down into 3 positions.
On the
my assumption was that it was going to start out at the size. The lowest position would start it out at the current height of a Mark V, and that the levels would jack it up for more comfortable lathe turning for taller people. But it's the opposite. The tallest setting is the current height of a Mark V approximately, and the lowering lowers it to make it a more comfortable height table saw for shorter people.
Right.
So that really surprised me because I think that the comments that I see in the user community, you do see some comments about the table saw being tall, but most of what people say is the lathe is short.
Yeah. So that machine was a prototype that was made back in the early 1980s. And yeah, it was at the time addressing their biggest complaint, and turning was not a big deal back in those days.
Really?
Yeah, so Sorby had yet to really hit the U.S. hard with their high-speed steel tools. They had a really primitive chuck called the Universal Chuck that we sold. Well, we offered. We didn't sell many of them. There weren't pen kits available. There wasn't acrylic to turn. So it wasn't until later, after that prototype was created, that the turning craze kind of took off. So I would agree, if they were to start from scratch today, I think they would consider the lathe as just as important as a table saw.
I find that comment fascinating, Scott, because I thought turning was always popular. I didn't realize that this is something that has peaked in popularity. So you're saying that when the Shopsmith Mark V was coming to market in the mid 1950s, there wasn't a big demand for the lathe?
No, it was one of those tools that everybody thought was really, really cool. And some people made themselves some cradles, and a couple other people made, some railings for a staircase. But for the most part, that wasn't looked at as a primary function. And like I said, we didn't have live centers back in those early days. So you're using a cup center, which, if you've ever turned much with a cup center, that can be rough, especially the slower you are at turning, which you typically are when you're new, the bigger of an adventure turning with a cup center is.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, it really started having a bit of a renaissance in the 80s. And that was after that whole thing. And then also, if you look at about the mid to late 80s, that's when Shopsmith introduced the various tool rests to attach to the tool rest arm, because again, turning started to catch on. By the 90s, Shopsmith actually launched a whole separate website called Wood Turning Unlimited that was focused entirely on turning and wood blanks and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So stick with me, kid. You'll learn some useful stuff.
Well, what's interesting about the Mark VII, well, even people who have retrofitted their Mark Vs with the double tilt base, because both of those bases separate, there's an opportunity to make some homemade risers that would fit in there, right?
Sure.
And you could make some various height riser blocks. And I had considered doing that, but I'm just not to the point where I'm into turning that much. And the other thing I have a concern about is, as you increase the height of the headstock, you are vastly changing that center of gravity.
Yep.
So it would take a little more engineering than just jacking it up, right? You may have to widen the leg base with some lumber.
A lot of people do put blocks underneath the feet, and it's just as stable as long as your feet are stable, right? As long as the base is stable, it's just as stable at that height because of where you're repositioning the height of it. But you're right. If you were to introduce something that doesn't lock firmly in place and add a little bit of weight, that could be interesting.
Yeah. So they have opportunities to come up with add-on products to address many of the concerns in the spirit of that X6000.
Yep, I agree. So they had a couple of Mark IIs in there. They had a 10ER, and I'm not sure what else. I mean, I was just in shock that they were showing the X6000, because that was one of those things that they had kept so secret for so long. And you'll notice that the table system was off, the carriage was off, the guards were off, because those things had already come to market, but they never shared that height adjustability, and a few changes that were made to the headstock itself, which really aren't all that critical. They were redesigning that in order to move the switch to the left, which California was requiring for their standards, which they accomplished with the C headstock. Yeah, so that was just fun. It was fun to see that they had those things out and on display, and that folks could actually touch them if they wanted to.
Yeah.
They left us alone with them. That's really surprising.
Well, especially in the context of a 75th anniversary, to see the visual history, the tactile history of the machines.
Yep, exactly. All right, so then there was another room, well, not another room so much as yet another hallway and the space where the donuts were being served. What did they have scattered on tables and in piles all throughout that space?
Yeah, they had lots of Shopsmith equipment, and this was the auction room. It was a silent auction, so the kind where there was a sheet presented and you wrote your name and a price down. I bid on the Shopsmith wet dry grinder, which is quite rusty and needs some restoration. But I think that's going to be a fun project. So I won that, and I was happy to donate to charity. It went to a charity called Peace and Tranquility. On Friday night,
And Shopsmith donated all of those items that were.
Shopsmith donated all the items. We, as the user group, bid on them.
Yeah.
And they collected our donations and forwarded on to it's called Peace and Tranquility Lake Corporation. And Nick Cups presented a check, I think it was for $3,600, $3,600 Friday evening at the dinner to the representatives of Peace and Tranquility. And I believe what she said is that if something like for $5,000, they can service 3,000 or 4,000 families a year. So what they do is they put on Christmas dinner events and Thanksgiving dinner events and invite families from the local area who don't have the wherewithal to put on their own holiday meal or so forth to come and experience a celebration. So I'm not fully I'm not fully up to speed on everything they do, but they're a nonprofit, and I thought it was local. I think it's right there in Huber Heights, and I just was very pleased to see that auction, and I was very, very happy to buy a worn out old wet dry grinder.
And you didn't go away with a greenie headstock?
I think they had 3 greenie headstocks, and I forget the fellow's name who ended up buying 2, but that was just 3 of 50.
Yes.
I said, wow, they had 15 of those? Because he told me 50. I thought he said 15. I said, no, 50.
Yes.
So what in the world is Shopsmith doing storing 50 greenie headstocks?
Yeah, not anymore.
Why would they even accumulate those? Because one of the things that people say is that Shopsmith should get into refurbishing used units.
Yeah, buybacks and things. Yeah.
And I kind of disagree with that, because what they would do is within the radius that is economically drivable, they would exhaust that market within 6 months.
Yeah.
Right. And prices would skyrocket in that circle. It's not going to be economical to acquire a used machine from Idaho, right?
Ship it in.
And ship it in. They wouldn't be able to give the user any money at all. And then their margins, it would really pinch in their margins on refurbishing those machines. I think they're much better off allowing the user community to find new homes locally.
Yeah.
For that equipment. But anyway, I thought, well, did they at one time acquire these greenies? Did they have a trade-in program?
So I remember back when I was managing the store in Boston, we always had the scenario where somebody would bring their machine in and there would be an issue that was so severe that we would need to change out enough of the components that
might as well
buy a new one, because we're going to have to replace enough of these components with current Poly V drive systems. Well, the moment you have to introduce the Poly V, you're replacing so many components, including the quill. You have no choice. You have to replace the quill. Well, there's nothing wrong with my quill. You can't drive it with
the number of splines are different, right? Like
exactly right.
14 or
exactly right. And a number of other things had to happen. So we would end up with these headstocks that they'd say, all right, I'm just going to buy a new one. And they'd leave it with us.
Oh.
So we just get these donor machines that just would begin to pile up. I suspect that's what's happened. Folks would send them in with hopes that they could have it retrofitted with maybe even go to Power Pro, because they'll do that. They'll update your machine to a Power Pro. But upon looking at them, they may say, there's just too much that has to be swapped out
here. That's the calculation I made with my Model 510. Yeah. People ask me all the time, is it worth it buying a Shopsmith Mark 7? I said, well, what are you starting with? If you're starting with a relatively recent 520 with the ProFence system and you've already upgraded the double tilt, then no, don't just buy the headstock.
Yes. Exactly.
But if you're starting with like a Mark 5, by the time you step through all
upgrade,
you're only going to be a few $100s away from a new machine.
That's right. That's right. So you got the grinder. That, by the way, that wet dry grinder was a product that Shopsmith sourced in Taiwan back again in the 90s, and it was a stationary standalone tool that you plug in and it was very similar to ones you could buy from Grizzly and AMT and Delta. A bunch of other Delta, a bunch
Seen
of
them with Delta badges
back in those days. They all had real subtle differences between them, but there were differences nonetheless. The Shopsmith one's not a bad get. Plus, you have a piece of Shopsmith history there too. It's not so common. I didn't buy anything there. I went there specifically because I saw a list of things I needed, and they had a part for the SawSmith 2000 table saw that I needed, and then it wasn't out. And at the very end of the day, I stopped back in at around 5 o'clock and helped them tear the chairs down and tables down, and said, by the way, I saw that you had this, but I never saw it on display. And Jim had pulled it from the auction because they just didn't think it was of a quality worth selling. And I said, well, I'm interested in it. So I actually ended up with something that never made it out to the auction floor.
What was it?
Well, we'll talk about it in an upcoming video.
So if you go to eBay and you search for Delta wet dry grinder 23-700, you'll see a glut of these wet dry grinders. And I just am very proud to have one with the Shopsmith logo.
There you go.
So this is one of the few times where I'm not really a tool guy. I buy tools for utilitarian purposes. This is one of the few times where I'm going to buy it just for the badge.
And then, okay, so the other space, and all this is happening, by the way, Friday morning from 8 o'clock to noon. All right. So then the last area, well, I'm talking about the group that we were in. Yeah. The last area was you were led back in our case, it was the very last session, back into the room that is where Nick had filmed those videos. And Bob Folker did a run through of the Power Pro version 2 headstock. It was, in our case, it was just a pantomime walkthrough. There was no sawdust produced. I was a bit disappointed in that. But, answering some questions from folks about it and talking about its development and its capabilities. I don't know if your experience with that was any different than ours.
Yeah, he did talk through it, and he talked through all the features and the functions and some of the reasons that they upgraded the way they did. And there was no sawdust produced. There was no tooling attached to the quill or anything. Yeah. And I think it was only turned on a few times. And that's a very similar experience I had at a Lowe's with Mike Young. I went to a Lowe's years before I bought the Mark 7. And because my initial question was, okay, I own a Mark 5 and I have the other attachments that make it, like Mark 20. What did Nick Tubb say? Which he's not wrong. It's true. Yeah. Why do I buy a Mark 7? What is what are the 7 functions? You know, what's going on here?
The additional 2 are the shaper and the router, but still at 10,000 RPM, you're at the low end of shaping speed, and you're still about half the speed of a typical router.
That's right.
So,
yeah, and I went up and he said, well, why are you here? And I said, I'm here to see the 7 functions. And I never saw any of the functions. So I think they had developed this sales technique that got away from what I have heard worked really well in the malls. I had heard a story, and maybe it was you who told the story, where they're at some, or maybe it was Bob Folkerth who told the story. They're at some mall in Alaska, and they had 2 guys, and one guy did nothing but, behind a protective screen, did nothing but cut wood and make parts. And the other guy did nothing but write orders. And they were both busy all day long.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. We used to joke about this, that we did some shows where you could almost just end the demo with cash orders line up on this side of the stage, charge orders line up over here, because people were just falling over themselves to get this machine. And it was because it was a great demo. It was a great demo. Yes.
Yeah. So they've gotten away from showing the machine making sawdust. And I think this leans into Nick Cupp's comment that Shopsmith has not been in control of the narrative.
Right.
And therefore, the uneducated people who don't know anything about Shopsmith, like John Malecki, have filled that void with uninformed facts and opinions. And so I think that's really a great transition, a needed transition to bring back some things that used to work well that have fallen away, and then to try some new things.
Yeah.
But I think everyone would agree that showing machine that is making sawdust is a better way to sell a machine than to talk through a touch screen. And I at the end of my session, I raised my hand and I said, Mr. Folkerth, I want to thank you and your family for everything that you've done for this company. I said, if it wasn't for your father and your siblings, I don't know that the company would exist. And it's a tool that has enriched my life. So I just want to say that I'm very grateful to the Folkerth family, but I know I'm being critical of the demo, but I think I'm justified in being critical.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on both of those points. Yes, they were absolutely curating that tool for quite a number of years. It would not have existed without them. If that tooling had gone away, if somebody had scrapped the tooling, it'd be long gone now. Because you look at all of that equipment, there would have been no way to justify bringing that back. Okay, so our group then wrapped up at noon. We stepped outside. The food truck is now there. Folks are hanging out, and not long after, the next group was showing up for their thing. Yeah. What did you end up doing in the afternoon?
Oh, I hung out and had a great hamburger off the truck, and sat at the picnic tables and chatted with folks, and that was a great time. I did go back home, so I was staying with my parents who live just a few blocks away, and sort of rested a bit, and then I knew that the auction was ending at 3, and I wanted to go in and protect my bid.
Okay, so you hovered over the grinder.
I stood in front of the bid sheet, and no.
You were prepared to add a 1 to any number anybody else. Well, they actually had set increments, right? Because again, this is for Shopsmith. Shopsmith donated these things, and they were going to give all the proceeds to the charity. So so that what would the next bid have to be? Another $10 on top of your bid?
It was different from every tool. Some was a minimum of +5. Some was a minimum of +20.
Yeah.
I forget.
There was a Mark V, right? Wasn't there a 510?
There was a 510 that I can't think of his name at the moment. Scott, maybe his name was Scott. I believe he maybe works. Scott from Cleveland, maybe.
Okay. Donated it.
No, he bought it
or something. He bought it. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, He won the auction. But anyway, I went back, I don't know, around 2 o'clock, and I thought, I'll meet some people in the afternoon group. I'll hang out, and we had a great time hanging out in the auction room. And ultimately the Shopsmith staff came out, collected the sheets, and we just had a great time teasing each other on all the junk we bought. Or didn't buy. We didn't win. So that was just a great time to hang out with the people.
Yeah. Now, so I didn't get a chance to stick around. My sister and I had some things to do, so we took off, and then we came back at, like I said, 5 o'clock. We stopped in and helped tear things down, and then there was an event at 6 o'clock. Place kind of reminded me of somewhat of like a local Dave and Buster's, right? A locally run, one of a kind, under one roof. It used to be a Levitt's furniture store back when I worked at Shopsmith down the street. And Shopsmith had rented a room there and had dinner prepared for us and had more giveaways. And my sister cleaned up. She got a couple different drawings. I forget what the actual drawings, how they were done, but she got a $50 gift card and another $50 gift card, and she got a bag with the Shopsmith apron and some other things in it. But there were things from gift cards and speed charts and things like that, all the way up to the newest stand mount scroll saw and a band saw,
brand new band saw. Yep.
A lot of folks walked away with some free swag. This is just the first day of two, by the way.
Yeah. So the everybody, when you sat down to a table, you sat down to your seat, you were treated to a little gift box with candy in it. And some of those gift boxes had a number. And that number corresponded, in my case, to the number 6. Okay. But not everybody got it. So maybe about half the people ended up with a bag. And there were some little things in there that are nice to have. It was very pleasant and generous gift. Then they came around and handed out a raffle ticket. And they drew the raffle, and that's where some of the larger prizes, like the $50 gift card, the $100 gift cards, the scroll saw, the band saw, and it just created a lot of fun, a lot of excitement.
You just reminded me, Lisa in her bag got a little package of tips for a dial indicator. Yeah. And she leans over, she's like, "What is this?" So I explained to her what it is. I pulled it up on the Shopsmith website and showed her what it was. There you go. And
many people got these for free.
So she saw the price of the dial indicator. She's like, "Well, I don't know that I'm ever going to need one of those or spend that kind of money." And then as she starts racking up the gift card, she leaned over to me and she goes, "Well, I guess I can buy my dial indicator."
Yeah. Well, yeah, so I'm not going to bother opening it. It was a blast. Friday night was a blast. Absolute fun. Good pizza. The name of the place is called Scene 75, and it's on I-75. Okay, and I believe they have other branches. I'm familiar with this place because when we would go down to visit my parents and my wife and I would go do something, they would take my kids over to Scene 75. It's a fun little place, go-karts and video games and
a roller coaster,
a little roller coaster. So this could be a point of interest for the video. I can't remember what year, but a couple years ago, a very serious tornado went right through North Dayton. And it went right through North Dayton, just south of my parents' house. And I believe Scene 75 was one of the businesses that was hit, along with many homes. Many businesses and many homes were absolutely destroyed. So the Scene 75 that we were at, I can't remember if it's the same location in a new building or a different location in an old building. I don't know, but
is that the tornado that touched down off of Needmore Road over there near Dixie?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember when that happened. Wow. I forgot that had that connection. Wow.
Yeah, so we were right there, and that was, you could have walked from Shopsmith to this place. I mean, it would take you 20 minutes, but yeah, 2019 Memorial Day tornado.
All right, so let's go forward then to Saturday. Saturday was just a half day, and that was not conducted at Shopsmith. Instead, John and David had arranged to have us meet in a meeting room at a hotel. I think most of the folks that came in from out of town were staying at that hotel.
Yeah, they had a block rate.
And here's where, just outside of the room, the guys that had been doing the 3D printing had their table set up. That was neat to see some of the different things that they've been working on, not just dust collection, but even reproducing the speed control from a 10ER through 3D printing, which they're doing as a collaboration. That was pretty slick to see. Was it Damien?
No, Damien is
no, he wasn't. No, he wasn't selling, but I'm saying he was hanging around.
Yeah. Damien's really active on the Facebook group, and he is really supporting the community with resale.
Yes.
And I say that with all sincerity. We do need these people to buy this stuff, tear it apart, and sell us the parts, quite frankly. And I know I've made at least one purchase from him.
I have too.
I don't know what. I can't remember what, but I know I've purchased from him.
I'm looking right now at a box. I have the most current Mark V model 500 dust collection in Upper Sawguard.
Okay.
And this is one that was introduced in the 1980s.
So it's a solid metal.
It's solid metal splitter. But most importantly, it has 2 dust chutes on the lower Sawguard. So just before they discontinued that model, they had made a bit of an improvement to the dust collection and the guards. And I bought that for my sister. So we need to do a retrofit on her 500.
Yeah. So for more additional safety. Yeah. Good.
But I bought that from Damien as well.
Yeah.
So that we had a couple presenters, as I recall. I don't know what they talked about. It was
a couple of clowns. I mean, what a joke.
Well, why don't you go first then, Tom? What did you speak about?
I presented on a concept course to fine, and it's a PowerPoint. Well, it's a Google Slides document shared on the as a PDF shared on the Facebook group. And I was originally contacted by John Dalton, and he said, well, we want to come up with some things to do on Saturday morning. And we're thinking, we could get you and maybe some other people in the community. At that point, I think I started twisting your arm saying, man, you got to go, you got to present. But he said, well, let's do a 1 hour Q&A. And I said, nobody wants to do a 1 hour Q&A with me. So how about this? I'll do a half-hour Q&A, and I'll present on a half-hour topic. I'll come up with some topic, and I'll relate it to Shopsmith. I'm a big fan of Christopher Schwartz, who was the former editor of Popular Woodworking. He's made many appearances with Roy Underhill on the Woodwright Shop, and he's currently one of the owners and founders of Lost Art Press, who operate out of Covington, Kentucky, which is right across the river from Cincinnati. So Nick Cups can probably throw a rock through Chris's window. So maybe I sort of made the joke that maybe we'll get Christopher Schwartz into the next event. I'd love to see that. So anyway, he wrote an article for Popular Woodworking, which you can download for free, called Coarse, Medium, Fine. And I thought, let's talk about this in relation to Shopsmith. I didn't know how well it would go over, but I thought it went over really well. I thought people really enjoyed the presentation. People came up to me with many comments, and I did put some work into it preparing. So I'm very glad it came off as well as it did.
Very good. That, and as opposed to that, I prepared mine the night before, and it looked like it. No, you know what? I was shocked. I had a couple things in mind, but when we went on the tour and the X6000 was on display, that cemented in my mind something I wanted to talk about, because again, that that tool was a prototype and no one was going to see it. And the fact that it was there really took me aback. And so I ended up sharing a little bit on that machine as a whole prototype and what came from that, because a lot of the tools that we know today were actually a part of that machine. I'm still debating what I want to do with that and whether I want to present that as a video here on YouTube. Maybe I will. But it was fun just kind of walking through that and getting some interaction with the audience there with their questions, because I went through a number of U.S. patents that Shopsmith had created from that machine, and now that you know what you're looking at, you can see clearly, oh wow, that is the headstock, that is the base that we saw, and so on.
Well, as critical as we are with suggestions to what Shopsmith should be doing, the Folk Earth family did focus on innovation, and they did bring many innovations to this tool. And I think that's why they were showing the X6000, is because it was a pivot point. It was a foci of a lot of things that we're enjoying today as safer, more accurate, easier tools to use. Your sister's using the 500 table, and you're upgrading the safety equipment. I'm a big fan of telling people at least go to 510. It is just from a safety and usability standpoint. I think it's the bare minimum, right? I just think the 500 system had its time, and the 510 and forward is keeping up. Okay. And they did that. And the X6000 apparently was instrumental in for the failure it was, all the work that they put into it was in fact a success, right?
Oh, I think just like out of Detroit, right? You get these really interesting prototype cars of the future, and from those come little teeny improvements that matter.
Right.
And maybe it doesn't have the fins on it, and we never were able to fly.
Bumpers filled with water.
but the aerodynamics and the air conditioning and the intermittent wipers, another good movie, by the way.
So you're pondering what to do with the video. I really think that's such a pivotal topic for where the Mark 7 is today, the X6000, that it sort of deserves a bespoke video on your channel with sort of up close graphics and high quality. There were maybe some content created in the room. I think it definitely deserves sort of all the digital clarity that you could bring today with the YouTube platform as a separate video, for sure.
Well, I appreciate that, and maybe we'll do that. So you did a presentation, and we ate some donuts, and I did a presentation, and we ate some more donuts and some Q&A. It was all in all just a really fun get together. I'm glad that we did this, and from that point you disappeared. I reached out to you to invite you to dinner, and you were gone. I think you were almost already home, if not already home, by the time I got a hold of you. So
I had planned on staying more of the weekend and visiting with my parents more, but I had a personal issue come up, and I had to make it back home.
Yeah, well,
it was unfortunate, but I felt like I spent,
and we didn't even get a chance to thank him. I'm sorry. That's an old Superman reference. Suddenly, Superman would disappear, and we didn't even get a chance to thank him.
So my hopes for next year, I'd love to do it again next year. It was so good. I think easily this could be 300 people. I think where the throughput was limited was associating it with how do we get everybody through the factory tour. We just need to sort of abandon the idea that everybody needs to go on the factory tour. And
really?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the people who've already been should bow out. We shouldn't go again.
Yeah, maybe so. But what if, while day one is taking place at the factory, day 2 is also taking place at the same time, and then you shift the whole group. So right there, you could possibly double the group.
Well,
assuming that you wanted to do something that was specific to the community. I would have loved to have seen some more show and tell, people bringing in some of the things that they've worked on, some jigs and fixtures that they're particularly proud of. One guy brought in a bucket full of crap and just gave it away, which was a lot of fun. That was, I thought that could have been repeated.
You were unfortunate to get some of that junk, right?
No, I don't think I did.
Yeah, so I brought in some things that have been sitting around my garage. As I moved from the 510 system to the ProFence system on the Mark 7, there are things that just didn't fit anymore. And I had held them back for the conference.
I did get something. I did. I got the post from the 500.
Yeah, the lathe post.
Where did I put that?
The screw post.
Yes. All right. We'll track that down. Anyway,
boy, you made me lose my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
I hope there's a swap opportunity next year. I hope there's a swap opportunity where we can, bring some of the things that, we've outgrown or things that aren't necessarily bad tools, but they're just not for us. And we'd like to see someone else get some value out of it. I think we could go. I think it could be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday thing. I think you could easily get 300 people with proper marketing and advertising. And I believe Shopsmith should get behind that, and they should definitely organize that, because it's really them who are getting the benefit out of it, right? This is something they need to do to spread the word. From the standpoint, though, going back to the factory tour, we live in the digital age. There could be virtual tours. If we're at a more traditional conference facility, they could set up booths that focus on. They could set up a booth, walking you through, focusing on some of the innovations they're working on into the future. So there could be definitely a factory connection. But I think to open up the opportunity to the numbers of people who really want to come, it's going to be difficult to take groups of 15 through the factory on a 45-minute rolling schedule.
All right, we'll work on that, because there's more. I think it could be done. Let me pop the bubble of virtual tour. Part of the reason why, even back in the day when I worked for them, why they didn't allow photography is, you might recall that there was a Taiwanese company that knocked off the Shopsmith at one point. Actually, 2 Taiwanese companies. And part of what makes the Shopsmith special is the way they produce it. Mm-hmm. And the last thing they would want to have is people having video or still shots of some of the more interesting machines. So maybe there would be a way to produce a tour virtually that would not expose their secrets. But man.
So apparently you didn't see Everett Davis's post to your My Growth Rings Facebook.
Yeah, no, I did see it. And in fact, I've got a picture from an early visit myself that I've never shared it. So.
Yeah, so I wonder if the cat's already out of the bag, I guess, so to speak.
Well, no, you didn't see everything. Yeah. There's some machinery that they didn't show that is quite interesting. So
what about you? Would you go next year if there was another one in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, if it were possible to fit into my schedule changed, which is what allowed me to do this. And I'm right now writing my schedule for the entirety of 2024, my work schedule. And I plan into that, for example, a vacation at the end of July to Denver to spend time with my dad on his 90th birthday.
Okay.
So I block everything out. So if I don't know even a rough idea of when it might take place, there's a good chance I wouldn't be able to fit it in. So
that's one of the things that big software companies who do annual user conferences, before the 2023 conference even starts, they know the 2024 date,
Right.
because they're going to be leasing out these huge venues
Sure.
and conference centers that require a
Right.
year or two.
Right.
And
then they're passing out swag. Don't forget to join us in Miami next year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Yeah.
I know.
So they may. I look at the 2023 conference as a good foundation. It proved that there is enough excitement in the community that they can draw the numbers, and they can put on just a great time for the users. And it might stutter here in 2024, but hopefully by the time we get to 2025, it's a real deal. I would love to come. I had such a great time. I left there saying, hey, I'd like to do this every year.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be against it. Just like I say, for me, it's just a tough thing to schedule. So.
Right.
All right, Tom. Well, thank you so much for getting together. Like I said, we could have had this conversation over pizza, just the two of us, with Lisa chiming in. But since we didn't get a chance to do that, thank you for meeting and taking this time to chat. Anything else? Any final words we would say to a viewer? They should come next year. Yeah. To our viewer, should they come next year?
The view, if they have it, come.
Okay.
I'd be honored to be asked to do another presentation. How about you? Would you, assuming you can make the date, would you commit to another presentation?
Maybe. It's a completely different thing getting in front of a group of people as opposed to shooting a video where you can edit some things out.
Oh, sure.
And, I can take my time, get my thoughts together. Man, when you're live, not the best time to lose your train of thought. So
yeah, you can't edit out all the ums and the right.
I actually tried using some software one time to edit out. It was sort of a Chat GPT kind of an offshoot to edit out the silent parts and the filler words. Oh my gosh, it's awful. I begin every sentence with well or so or some kind of a filler word that needs to go away.
Yeah. And I would love to see, for a conference next year, I'd love to see some people like Christopher Schwartz be invited for a presentation. I'd like to see a vendor room, right? To the vendors that Shopsmith is partnering with, like for the scroll saw. Who makes the new scroll saw?
It's General Tools Excalibur. That particular version's made in Taiwan or China.
Why not have
for them?
Why not have a vendor showcase area where we can walk up and talk to those people? I'd love to see something like that. I think we were all invited to, if we have an idea, go ahead and make it happen. So I realize that I'm pouring out these ideas. I do not have the time or skill set to do them. I do think Shopsmith should, though. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, and I think the future is bright. That's the best thing about this is I came away feeling really good about the future of Shopsmith. So that's been needed for a long time.
Great.
All right, Tom. Thanks again. It's a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, it's a good time.
All right. Make it a great week.
All right. Bye.
Do you have a tagline, Tom?
No.
Keep all your fingers on.
I don't know. Maybe my new tagline is set screw. I don't know.
What's it ain't so sketchy.
It ain't so sketchy.